for a lot of people, or
Zoe,
prevent them from getting services.
Zoe Carpenter writes for The Nation. You can check out our work on thenation.com. Thank you very much for talking to our viewers. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
The House Rules Committee will be taking up the next set of debate over the continuing resolution. Look for our coverage on cspan.org. But now, live coverage of the House.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., October 2nd, 2013. I hereby appoint the Honorable Glenn Thompson to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 3rd, 2013, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between parties, with each party limited to 1 hour, and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the President charged that the government shutdown is the result of a, quote, ideological crusade to deny affordable health care to millions of Americans. I would beg the President to read his correspondence and listen to the millions of Americans who are losing their affordable health insurance as a result of Obamacare, who are seeing their health care premiums skyrocket or their hours cut back at work, or who are losing their jobs or the health plans they liked and that he promised they could keep. Here's a sampling of the emails and letters I've received last week from people who've come face to face with the ugly reality of Obamacare. A woman from El Dorado County, California writes, last month I received a letter from the human resources manager at my place of employment that states I'm going to receive a 23% pay cut as a result of Obamacare. They say they're required by the employer mandate to provide insurance for every employee or face a fine. My 23% pay cut's equal to $22,000 and will financially devastate my family as I'm the primary income of our family. I tried to explain that I have insurance through my husband's employer and Blue Cross Blue Shield and I do not need another plan. However, they said Obamacare does not have an option for married employees who are paying for coverage through their spouse's employer. I even offered to pay the $2,000 employer fine instead of being subject to the $22,000 pay cut, but they said that's not an option. A man from the town of Pioneer, California writes, I received a letter from my insurance carrier that as of the end of this month, they will drop all individual plans in our state because of Obamacare. A woman from Markleeville writes, Obamacare is already affecting me and my ability to obtain diabetic testing supplies. Please at least defund it, better yet repeal it, and then go to work on real reforms that are necessary. A man from Sonora writes, I've just received my projected health care cost for this coming year from Kaiser. The premium will be increasing by 43.8%. Health care is becoming increasingly unaffordable. The current health care, fuel, and power cost is destroying our economy. Wages are going down and the cost of living is rising. If the current trend's not reversed, our country and all in it are looking at financial and economic ruin. A man from Amador County who's in the durable medical equipment business writes, Obama's already killed our industry, and soon your telephone's going to be ringing off the hook with disgruntled patients that cannot get product. A woman from Nevada City writes, please repeal Obamacare. The health insurance for our family this year went up more than $450 each month. It's not possible for middle-class citizens to pay for that. From Farmington, California, a woman writes, I've worked in the healthcare industry as a registered nurse for over 25 years and have already seen its negative impact in the hospital just in preparing to begin working with it. Also, my husband and I have noticed the increasing of prices in our own private health care charges. A woman from Granite Bay writes, as a result of Obamacare, our health insurance costs have tripled. Our copayment has doubled and the deductible has also gone up. Also, my primary doctor retired, the next one closed his practice, and my present doctor will close her practice if Obamacare is not repealed. A man from Rockland writes, as a result of this legislation, my health insurance cost for my employer has nearly tripled. Combined with anemic economic growth resulting in a 1% pay raise per year since 2009 and a bonus cut by 2/3, increased taxes et al., I've effectively had severe pay cuts and most of my co-workers as well. The ACA is a burden on me, my family, my community, and our future. From Auburn, California, a woman writes, I did some shopping at Save Mart in Auburn today and talked to a woman who works there. She said the store's cutting back everyone's hours to 20 hours per week. I asked if it was because of Obamacare, and she said yes. This is happening all over the country, and it's outrageous. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the President and our Democratic colleagues are hearing these same complaints. I wonder, why aren't they listening? I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is day 2 of the Republican shutdown holding America hostage. The stated objective is their fury at what they feel to be the unconstitutional Affordable Care Act that will wreck the economy and destroy health care in America. They harbor these feelings and will not relent until the law is defended, even if it means shutting down the government, denying people essential services, furloughing federal employees, and raising the specter of default on our national debt. This is despite the fact that the health care bill passed 3 years ago. It was declared constitutional by the United States Supreme Court and was argued extensively in the 2012 elections, which the Republicans lost. We've now seen the first day of the Affordable Care Act, about 10 million visits to the website, phone lines jammed, hundreds of thousands of Americans, doctors, nurses, people in hospitals, insurance companies, involved in making the biggest advance in health care since Medicare 50 years ago. Are the Republicans afraid that the program will succeed, that Americans will see that this effort to help 40 to 50 million Americans who are low income or people with pre-existing conditions will actually get the help? Republicans, in any event, should not pull the rug out from underneath the people who could benefit from the law or the hundreds of thousands of people who've made significant investments and are working to improve the delivery of health care in America at great effort and expense for themselves. According to the Independent Congressional Budget Office, this is going to provide more access at less cost and lead to a deficit reduction on the order of $1 trillion over the next 20 years. In fact, the Republicans in the House of Representatives have taken $1/2 trillion of these savings from the Affordable Care Act and stuffed it in their budget to make it appear that it's more affordable. If they were serious and not hypocritical, they would remove the money from their budget that's attributed to the bill they're working so hard to defund. While they're at it, if they're serious and not cynical, they would have a conference committee on the budget. Wasn't it interesting, the 11th hour Hail Mary proposal late Saturday night to have a conference committee on the continuing resolution, despite the fact that there was nothing to conference. It was defund Obamacare or nothing. But if House Republicans really think conference committees are such a good idea, why don't we have a conference committee on the budget? The Senate has been waiting for the House Republican leadership for 6 months to approve conferees, so maybe we can see if we can reconcile some of these differences. If my friends were serious and not cynical about saving money, they would bring their own spending bills to the floor. Remember, it's been over 2 months since they abruptly stopped the appropriations process with the Treasury HUD bill still in limbo. Just walked off the floor halfway through the debate. The remaining 8 spending bills appear to be so bad under the Ryan budget that uses those evil Obamacare savings that their own members don't even seem to want to vote for them. Finally, if they are serious and not cynical, they should absolutely take the debt ceiling blackmail off the table. There's no reason to threaten to destabilize not just our economy, but the global economy by pretending for 1 minute that America won't pay its bills. We will, but to threaten we would do otherwise invites chaos. This is day 2 of the Affordable Care Act. The sun came up in the east. No one was forced to go to the post office for their prostate exam. No women had to go to the airport screening for a mammogram. No doctors have been arrested or hospitals shut down. What did happen is people are getting better insurance with more choices at more affordable rates. I even bet that the sun sets in the west tonight. Isn't it time to end the Republican shutdown?
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, for 5 minutes.
1 minute.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, last night, House Republicans once again showed up and took action to stop the bleeding of Harry Reid's government shutdown. President Obama has already bullied the House by threatening to veto these important bills to protect our nation's veterans, keep D.C. schools and services open, and preserve and reopen our national parks. By voting against these bills, House Democrats turned their back on nation's veterans. It's reprehensible to sit back and watch our veterans suffer. The Honoring Our Promise to Americans Veterans Act would ensure vital funding for disability compensation, pensions, the GI Bill, and other critical benefits that are threatened by Harry Reid's shutdown. Today we will give the Democrats another chance to vote in favor of veterans. This is not a partisan issue, it's an American issue, and we must pass this legislation today. House Republicans are here. We're ready to negotiate. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest the President should cancel his trip to Asia and come negotiate with us. Simply put, in God we trust. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Ms. Gutierrez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. We've all heard that later today an immigration bill will be introduced in the House of Representatives in order to keep the issue moving forward. I plan to sign on to that bill. As I understand it, it will combine elements of the Senate's bipartisan compromise bill with a bipartisan House border security bill. I'm going to sign on because I want to stand with 200 of my Democratic colleagues and assert that the Democratic Party is ready to move forward on immigration reform. The bill that Democrats will put forward is not a perfect bill. It's a product of negotiations, compromise, and bipartisanship. Having spent many long hours working with Ted Kennedy and John McCain, Jim Comey and Jeff Flake on bipartisan bills in 2004, 2005, 2006, and 2007, I know that you never get everything you want when you engage in genuine bipartisan effort. But these days, with our sharply divided politics, bipartisanship is the only way to get anything done. The American people are sick of U.S. Congress totally divided and can't seem to come together even to keep our government open. Yesterday, Puerto Rican, Korea War veterans and Mississippi and Iowa veterans of World War II had to break down barricades to visit the monuments on the National Mall that celebrate their sacrifice and honor. It should have never had to come to this. And on immigration, I still think we have a chance to work together and get something done. It's really rare, the AFL-CIO and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce agreeing on anything, but you know what? They came to an agreement on immigration. The largest growers actually worked out an agreement to move forward on immigration reform with the union founded by Cesar Chavez that's been fighting for them for 40 years. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal editorial pages represent different ends of the political spectrum, but their editorials calling for Congress to address immigration reform are so similar you could practically be accused of plagiarism. And I've talked with many of my Republican colleagues. They too understand that our current legal immigration system is broken. Many of them understand that creating ways for people to come legally are necessary to spark our economy, reunite families, and maintain our values in the United States. They understand that the path to law and order is to have a functioning legal immigration system that allows people to come with a visa and not a smuggler. Many of my Republican colleagues understand that we cannot secure the border unless we secure and combine border security with a legal avenue for people to come here. And they understand that we cannot establish law and order without getting the millions of people here into the system, on the books, paying taxes, and legitimize their stay in the United States, including citizenship for those who choose to embrace this country, just as every wave of previous immigrants have had that choice. And many of my Republican colleagues realize that the best way, politically and practically, to achieve a full implementation of things like E-Verify and an entry-exit visa system, the only way to effectively enforce our law is to allow for legal immigration. We can and must do the legalization, the border security, and all of the enforcement together. With the introduction of a bill, you will see the unity and commitment of my party, the Democratic Party. But I believe it is only after we emerge from this very dark tunnel of partisanship and budget bitterness that we can find a way for leaders in both parties to move forward, work together, and get the Speaker to give us a vote. But the clock is ticking. 2 million people will have been deported by this administration, a Democratic administration, by President Barack Obama sometime in October. Believe me, the deportation machine does not pause for a government shutdown. And this Saturday, October 5th, 163 cities, there will be marches and demonstrations and activities to push this Congress and especially the Republican leadership to allow a vote on immigration reform. I will march in Chicago, meet with evangelical leaders and join canvassers fanning out across congressional districts on Saturday. And then on Tuesday, October the 8th, I invite all my colleagues to join the tens of thousands of Americans, immigrants, supporters, citizens for a concert and a rally to make sure this chamber knows the truth. And that is that the persistent and consistent pressure to pass an immigration bill in red states, blue states, purple states has not subsided and is stronger than ever. I ask you all to come and join me and our immigrant community from across this nation. Mr. Speaker, I will show you the faces of families who want this Congress to put aside our party differences and to act for the families of America, for the millions of American citizens that need a fair and just immigration system. Come and join us in your city on October 5th. And if not, come and join us here in the capital of the United States on October the 8th. The people will be speaking. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government is shut down, thereby damaging America's economy generally and the Tennessee Valley's economy in particular, where thousands of defense, NASA, and other federal government employees have been furloughed because the President, in his discretion, designated them non-essential. I hope my remarks add clarity about the shutdown, its cause, and the efforts to fund the government. City, county, and state governments across America passed one bill called a budget that funds services for their fiscal years. In contrast, Washington uses a three-step spending process. First, Washington should pass a bill that is called a budget, yet does not, in fact, spend a dime. Rather, in Washington, the word budget is more like a game plan. It is much like a football coach's playbook. It lists the team's plays, but does not, in and of itself, gain a single yard. Second, Washington should pass authorization bills that describe the programs the federal government is to operate. For example, the NASA authorization bill authorizes NASA to work on the Space Launch System so that America can have a human spaceflight program. Like budgets, authorization bills spend no money. Third, Washington must pass appropriation bills to actually spend money on the programs authorized. If Congress fails to pass appropriation bills, then Congress uses continuing resolutions as crutches for our failure. There are 12 appropriation bills that collectively fund the federal government. So far this year, the House, months ago, passed appropriation bills for national defense, energy and water, homeland security, military construction, and veterans affairs. If the Senate passes these appropriation bills, then each of these federal programs are fully funded and exempt from the federal government shutdown. That's correct, exempt from the shutdown. Unfortunately, the Senate inexplicably refuses to vote on any of the 12 appropriation bills. Senate intransigent is why we are here today debating a continuing resolution to temporarily fund the federal government. For emphasis, continuing resolutions are the worst way to fund the federal government. By definition, continuing resolutions are for a short period. Speaker Boehner's CR is for 2.5 months. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's CR is for even less, 1.5 months. Each CR kicks the can down the road and forces America to quickly face yet another shutdown risk. Each CR means federal agencies cannot plan long-term, and contracting officers are restricted in their ability to let contracts for services and goods provided by the private sector to the federal government and American citizens. Generally speaking, continuing resolutions fund at prior year spending levels, which means spending does not change to reflect changing priorities, circumstances, and challenges. In sum, continuing resolutions are inherently inefficient, waste tax dollars, and retard proper federal government operation. Hence, I have historically voted against less than year-end continuing resolutions in hopes of forcing Congress to do the compromising necessary to pass authorization and appropriations bills. This work will not be done so long as the continuing resolution crutch protects Congress from failure. Which brings us to today. The Senate, White House, and Congress agree on roughly 99% of the appropriation bills. Let me emphasize that. The Senate, White House, and Congress agree on roughly 99% of the appropriation bills. The solution, therefore, to our impasse is simple. Congress and the White House should fully fund the 99% we agree on, end the government shutdown, and work out our differences on the remaining 1%. Instead, the Senate and White House use a federal government shutdown to coerce the House of Representatives into spending money America does not have on a socialized medicine program that does not work and that a majority of Americans do not want. Yesterday I spoke with House leadership, and I urged them to pass bills that, one at a time, fund the 99% of the federal government that we agree on. I thank the House leadership for doing exactly that yesterday and today. Each bill we pass exempts yet another part of the federal government from the shutdown. I urge my friends across the aisle to stop using the 99% as a hostage, to stop punishing citizens across America in their effort to coerce the House of Representatives into funding the 1% we have a legitimate disagreement on. I urge my friends across the aisle to join us, to join America, to compromise, yes, to compromise, and pass as many funding bills as we can to minimize and eliminate the harmful effects of a federal government shutdown. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the time has come for a reason. No longer can we afford to allow a small segment of this Congress to drive the debate. It's not just the tail wagging the dog. It is the tip of the dog's tail wagging the entire body politic. The time has come for those in the middle to come together and take back the wheel from those intent on crashing this Congress into a ditch. As I stand here today, the government of the United States is shuttered, shut down by nothing more than brinksmanship. Small business loans are not being processed. The Center for Disease Control Flu Prevention Program is being halted, and the National Institute of Health is no longer accepting kids into a cancer research program. Some food safety operations have ceased, and cleanup at 600 toxic waste sites has been suspended. It wasn't always this way, though. There was a time when we had regular order. There was a time when budgets were proposed, funding levels and priorities were debated, differences were hashed out, and bills were passed to fund the government. And even when regular order broke down, we were always able to at least pass a continuing resolution to continue funding the government. Not this time. This time, an effort to repeal a law that was passed by both houses, signed by the President, approved by the Supreme Court, has shanghaied all federal spending. Many across the aisle acknowledge how harmful and irresponsible such a plan is. Senator McCain said, "In the United States Senate, we will not repeal or defund Obamacare, and to think we can is not rational." Budget Chairman Paul Ryan said, "We have to stay on the right side of public opinion. Shutting down the government puts us on the wrong side." My colleague, Senator Kirk, said, "Let's not shut down the government just because you don't get everything you want." The list goes on and on. Chris Christie, Mitt Romney, Bruce Johnston, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and many more all oppose efforts to shut the federal government. Yet we continue down this dangerous path. When I first came to this Congress, Congressman Kirk, now Senator Kirk, told me that everything that gets done here gets done in the middle. Now is the time for the reasonable middle to come together and reject the strategy that says, if I can't win, I'll just kick the ball in the woods. Sorry, Seth. Not only is shutting down the government harmful to my constituents, businesses, and the economy, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't address the budget deficit. If we really want to get our fiscal house in order, let's fund the government and bring back a balanced, big, bipartisan deficit deal to the floor. We did it before, and we can do it again. I, along with only 37 colleagues, voted for the Cooper-Latourette budget, which mirrored the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles plan. Where were those so concerned with the debt then? If the fiscal watchdogs on the other side of the aisle really want to solve our budget woes, let's get together on a big budget deal. And let's do it now, because every day we waste in this useless limbo land is one less day we have to address the very real and very harmful problems facing this country. We have got to pass comprehensive immigration reform, a farm bill, an infrastructure funding bill, a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, reasonable gun reforms, tax reform, and numerous other much-needed legislation. But without doing the basic work of Congress, like passing a budget, we can't address the real issues facing us. As long as we continue to look in the rearview mirror at a law passed 3 years ago, approved by the Supreme Court, we will fail to navigate the real obstacles before us. We need to keep our eyes on the road and come together to solve the real challenges that lie ahead. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mica, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues. When you think you've seen it all, just stick around here for another day. Yesterday, in one of the most appalling events I've seen in our nation's capital, was the closing of the World War II monument, putting up barriers, World War II memorial, putting up barriers to stop our veterans from accessing that open space area. How offensive could you be? How much more pain do you want to inflict on the American people? Now, here is the group that closed the White House. This president closed the White House and said he didn't have money to open it to the public. I would suggest, first of all, maybe we need to get a new Interior and Parks Director and fire those folks or furlough those folks that can't leave public spaces and memorials open to the public. What an offense. When I thought that was offensive yesterday morning, I came to the House last night and saw again another horrible offense. Republicans passed a measure to make certain that our military were paid and our servicemen and women in harm's way were taken care of financially. We saw also the need afterwards to help our veterans. And last night, in one of the most offensive actions of the House, the other side of the aisle turned down an opportunity to keep our veterans whole. How offensive could you be? But they want to inflict pain. I'm telling you, folks, I've been around here a long time. I've never seen an operation like this. As the Chief of Staff in the U.S. Senate, Ronald Reagan would pick up the phone. He would even call me as a chief of staff to get things going in the Senate, talk about things. He'd call the senators. He would work with representatives. He would bring them in and have communication. Even Bill Clinton, after I voted to impeach him, would work with you to get things done, and we got things done. We had a shutdown then. This isn't the end of the world. There's 17 shutdowns. And some good came out of that shutdown. It was a horrible thing. We don't need to repeat them. We don't need to have this one. But we did balance the budget. We balanced the budget with a Republican Congress working with a Democrat president. There's no need for this offensive approach that's being taken, not working, not communicating. This can and should be resolved. Members of Congress have that important responsibility and can't neglect it. Now, this is much more difficult than just a shutdown, a temporary shutdown. We're talking about a permanent shutdown of the federal government. You think having a few of the federal services eliminated or suspended temporarily is tough? In a few weeks, the government will run out of money. Why? Because these folks will talk to you about a budget. They haven't passed a budget since 2008. The only way we got the other body, the Senate, to pass a budget was to pass a bill to embarrass them that said no budget, no pay. This is the group that had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. They couldn't even pass an FAA bill, 20 extensions, a transportation bill. They couldn't pass a budget. And here they're criticizing us. We came to work and we worked until 12:30 into Sunday morning. They were absent without leave. They never even came to work, the Senate, on Sunday. They came to work on Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they rejected every offer. We offered 3 times to compromise. And then we said, let's sit down. We've been holding yesterday a conference. No one showed up. You have to show up. The president has to be the president. Why does he take a little of this Malaysia money? He's not going to Malaysia. Open the White House. Open the memorials to our veterans. Use some of that money that he's gaming the system, trying to inflict pain on our veterans and our citizens. There is no reason for this. Good people of good intention can come together, make this government work, make it better, pay our bills and be responsible, and bring this out-of-control spending under control and get our government being accountable and responsible. That's what the American people want. They're tired of the blame game. Let's get America going in a positive direction. I know we can do it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, it's day number 2 of a government shutdown. The American public is watching, and they're not happy with what they're seeing. Mr. Speaker, you are the leader of this body, the House of Representatives. You're the Speaker of the House. This is a House that's made up of both Democrats and Republicans. We need leadership at this juncture, and Mr. Speaker, you're the one person who can bring it, and you're not showing that leadership. You need to take Democratic and Republican ideas and help us move forward. Now, I'm here to work. I'm a freshman, and I came here with the mandate to get Washington working again, to get people working again, and that's what I intend to do. But, Mr. Speaker, you've got to reach out to Democrats and invite us in to bring our ideas forward. You're the one person who can do it. I'm talking to my colleagues, on the Republican side, and I'll talk to the Republicans right now. We want to get the country moving forward, but we can come up with the best ideas possible. There's only one person who can bring that legislation to the floor. Mr. Speaker, that's you. We need leadership at this juncture, and the country is watching. Enough with the Washington politics. And now we hear that you may shut the government down to play more Washington politics for 17 days to tie this to the faith and credit of the United States of America. You're the one person who's going to do that, Mr. Speaker, and don't take us down that path. Too many Americans are suffering. We need leadership at this juncture, Mr. Speaker. There is a clean funding bill on your desk. Bring it to the floor. Bring it to the floor and let us have a chance to vote up or down. That's regular order. Give us a chance. It'll keep government open for 6 or 10 weeks, but give us a chance to vote on that, up or down. If the Republicans don't like it, fine, they're going to vote against it. But give us a chance to bring it to the floor. And it's not a bill that Democrats like, but we understand it'll keep the government open and it'll give us a chance to do what we were elected to do, pass a real budget, put a budget together. Mr. Speaker, enough is enough with the Washington politics. Now you're going to continue playing politics and bring little pieces of legislation here and there forward when what we need is a big plan and leadership. Bring the funding bill to the floor. Let's continue to pay our debt, and let's keep moving forward. Because people are hurting. Mr. Speaker, I'm a doctor. You know, the oath I took has two critical elements. To do good, well, Mr. Speaker, right now you're not doing any good. You're not doing the American public any good. And to do no harm. And the failure of this body, the failure of you to bring that legislation to the floor for us to vote on it, is doing irreparable harm. You know, as a doctor, do you know what's happening to the NIH? Do you know that they have to turn patients away? Patients who have no place else to go. This is their last-ditch effort to get in there. That isn't what we do in America. Mr. Speaker, you're the one person who can bring this legislation to the floor and do it. Now, I'm a doctor, and do you know what's happening in the CDC? We're about to enter flu season. God forbid we have an epidemic of anything. They're laying off almost 70% of their staff. This is putting America in harm's way. Mr. Speaker, do what my oath says as a doctor. Do good and do no harm. Right now, you're doing the exact opposite. Let's get Washington working again, and let's put the American people first. We the people. This is the United States of America. United. That means we've got to come together as a country and put the people first. Mr. Speaker, the American public is watching you. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning one of my colleagues across the aisle said very accurately, he was quoting another elected official, that everything that gets done in the middle. I happen to believe that the only type of legislation that really passes and lasts is that is done in a bipartisan way. That's why I commit myself in every bill that I author and I work on. I reach across the aisle and I find a friend to be the lead co-author, and we build support on both sides of the aisle. But, Mr. Speaker, based on the comments of my colleague and my own personal beliefs, you know, I believe that's why this health care law is so flawed and has so many flaws in it, because it was not done in that spirit. It did not honor that principle. It was done unilaterally in the most partisan way and shoved upon the American people. And it is publicly acknowledged that it has flaws. The majority of Americans are demanding fixes of the publicly acknowledged flaws in the health care law, flaws that are acknowledged by Republicans and Democrats alike. So instead of protecting perhaps the President's legacy, it's time to come together. Republicans are only seeking to common sense fixes to decrease costs and increase access, and fixes that are bipartisan and common sense. You know, last night I was very disappointed on this House floor. I voted to protect our veterans, to protect the citizens of the District of Columbia who are prevented from. Last night we had a bill that just allows them to use their own money that they pay in taxes to the municipality, that they contribute through the parking meters and the fines and the fees that they pay, just to be able to use their own money, and also to be able to open our monuments and our parks to the American tourists and American heroes, our honor flight folks that are coming in each and every day, our World War II, part of that greatest generation. And yet it was defeated by votes from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for political purposes. And I know politics within the Beltway, but those were bipartisan solutions to help key individuals. You know, Mr. Speaker, it's troubling that the Senate leader has prevented consideration of even the most common sense changes to the President's health care law, including one that has bipartisan support and previously passed its own chamber. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle in both parties already are overwhelmingly rejecting the medical device tax. Last year, 37 House Democrats voted with all Republicans to repeal the tax with a large bipartisan majority, 270 to 146. In March, the Democratic-led Senate voted 79 to 20 to repeal the tax. The senators from my own home state of Pennsylvania, one Democrat, Senator Bob Casey, one Republican, Senator Pat Toomey, supported the bill. And in fact, Senator Casey was its chief author and sponsor. The medical device tax repeal was part of the House continuing resolution. It was blocked consideration by Leader Reid. For the past 2 weeks, the House has worked to fund the government, prevent a shutdown, and protect the American people from the President's health care law. The Senate has decided to drag its feet and reject these reasonable proposals. Now, there is an appropriate way to conduct budget negotiations, and that is through the normal procedure of appointing a conference committee, appointing conferees. That's appointing negotiators, Republicans, Democrats alike, from both the House and the Senate, to get to the table, to sit down and to work out our differences. That is elementary civics. Unfortunately, the Senate leaders prevented regular order from proceeding. Mr. Speaker, I was elected to represent my constituents and reform government, and I will continue fighting on their behalf. Congress must act now to end this shutdown and get to work on the many challenges facing this great nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the distinguished gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Today is day 2 of the Republican government shutdown. It is day 2 of the Republicans throwing a temper tantrum because they don't have the votes to overturn the Affordable Care Act. They have chosen to hold the federal government hostage in order to placate a small, reckless, extreme faction of their conference. It's shameful, and it needs to stop. Already, national parks are closed, Head Start facilities are beginning to close, and paychecks to federal employees could be delayed. And if closing Head Start facilities wasn't bad enough, shutting the government down could cause great harm to pregnant women, infants, and children. That's right, Mr. Speaker. Pregnant women, infants, and children will begin feeling the impact of this Republican shutdown as funding for the WIC program begins to lapse. There are nearly 9 million pregnant and breastfeeding women, infants, and children on WIC. 9 million low-income people who receive healthy food and nutrition education from this important and vital program. WIC is a critical program that provides food and nutrition counseling for low-income pregnant and breastfeeding women, as well as for newborns and infants. It is a key program that helps pregnant and breastfeeding women stay healthy through proper nutrition and actually helps prevent many health issues associated with non-nutritious meals. In about a week, funding for WIC will dry up. Funding for food and nutrition education for low-income women and their children will be eliminated. Some states will see their funds dry up right away, and some, like Massachusetts, have budgeted in a way that will allow them to patch funds together to prevent major shortfalls only for a couple of weeks. Now, I come to this floor week after week to talk about how we can end hunger now. A few weeks ago, this House of Representatives cut SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, by $39 billion. Year after year, Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan tries to block grant SNAP, a $130 billion cut in the program. And a few years ago, the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, chaired then by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Kingston, attempted to cut WIC by hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, there's a pattern here of trying to balance the budget on the backs of the poor, on the backs of the hungry. There's a pattern here of saying to people who are struggling to make ends meet that they just don't matter. The Republicans who are forcing this government shutdown, those Republicans who are cheering on a government shutdown like cheerleaders at a pep rally, are inflicting real damage on real Americans. And those on the front lines are, unfortunately, poor women and children. Now, we're not going to end hunger now by painting a target on their backs and using them to balance our budgets. Income disparity is currently at its greatest gap since the Great Depression. Hunger is not getting any better in this country. Yet the Republicans in the House think it's okay to take food away from hungry people, including veterans and kids, just because they don't like those programs. That cut in food stamps that we debated and voted on a couple of weeks ago would throw 170,000 of our veterans off the program. Veterans, men and women who have served our country in battle. They would be cut from the program. What they are doing is wrong. It takes my breath away, Mr. Speaker. Ending hunger requires real leadership and not letting some right-wing zealots eviscerate the federal budget so that the hungry in America don't have the ability to put food on their tables. What is happening here is cold. It is heartless. It is unconscionable. We should be working to end hunger now instead of shutting down the federal government. The low-income women, infants, and children of this country deserve a hell of a lot better than they're getting from this Republican-led House of Representatives. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the health care marketplaces are finally open. The only complaint is that people are so eager to learn more about their options and to sign up that too many people logged on yesterday. Now, to hear my colleagues from across the aisle describe this day, you might expect to look out the window and witness the beginning of, as Ghostbusters once put it, 40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes, the dead rising from the grave, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Perhaps these warnings were overblown. The start of the Affordable Care Act resulted in exactly 0 people locked out of their offices with their paychecks on hold. By contrast, the Republican shutdown has furloughed 800,000 federal employees. Exactly 0 people yesterday were deprived of their annual flu shots because of the Affordable Care Act. In fact, Obamacare has made preventive care for things like vaccines free without copay to insured patients nationwide. By contrast, the Republican shutdown has forced the CDC to halt its annual seasonal influenza program just as flu season is getting underway. Because of the Affordable Care Act, exactly 0 infants yesterday were deprived of healthy food and nutrition information. By contrast, the Republican shutdown has put at risk the entire Women, Infants, and Children program, which provides some 9 million Americans with the support they need to feed their children. The Republican shutdown has also brought to a standstill critical, life-saving biomedical research being conducted at the NIH and NSF. Exactly 0 people yesterday went untreated because of the ACA for foodborne illnesses. By contrast, the Republican shutdown has forced the FDA to cease many of its food safety operations. The Affordable Care Act has not ushered in an era of doom and gloom that the Republicans promised. Instead, it has offered hope and opportunity for good health care coverage. Here's the reality. The ACA is helping my constituents who previously found health insurance out of reach. The access provided by ACA is long overdue. Rather than seek delay, we should be embracing it. For years, I've been hearing from people like Nicole from Lawrence, who writes not about the fear of the ACA, but rather, quote, the fear that the health care of your family will bankrupt you and that your lack of resources will leave you and your loved ones vulnerable to sickness and death, end quote. Now, I also hear optimism that comes from the options that can now be found in the new marketplace. Just ask Mary from Princeton, who wrote me earlier this week. Please do not allow the implementation of Obamacare to be delayed. I've been waiting and waiting for a time when my adult children would be able to afford health insurance. She goes on to say that the health care marketplace has given her, quote, the opportunity to review plans with them and to assist them to choose the best plan. And there's the single mother from Scotch Plains who wrote me, quote, I'm a registered Republican, and I am embarrassed by all that has been happening for the last few days. The Tea Party and some Republicans keep yelling that they're speaking for the people. Well, they're not speaking for me or anyone I know. Obamacare must be given a chance. I've been without coverage since my COBRA ended 2 years ago. I was unable to get reasonable coverage at a reasonable rate. I don't want charity. I'm not looking for a handout. I want affordable health care. I've been praying I stay healthy and patiently waiting for the Affordable Care exchanges so I can finally try my luck there. Please, please don't let the Tea Party take this away from me and so many others who need it, end quote. Now, I wish my colleagues across the aisle would accept this as the good news that it is. I wish they would accept that their stories of doom and gloom for Obamacare were wrong. But instead, we're learning that the dire stories were not a prediction, they were a threat. The Tea Party, confronted with the prospect of a duly passed law that has been upheld by the Supreme Court, have thrown a temper tantrum. They've taken hostage the entire federal government. They've sabotaged the process of self-government, all to prevent Americans from gaining access to affordable health care. Let's make the health care law work as well as possible. Let's together make our other government services, necessary services, work as well as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, now here we are, day 2 of the Republican shutdown. Now, the Tea Party extremists are really achieving their goal of dismantling government. Their shutdown is step 1. It's no secret that the Tea Party Republicans came here not as public servants, but to destroy and decimate our government. Now, millions of families, children, seniors, federal employees, and our economy are paying the price. The Republican refusal to back off of their extreme ideological demands has taken our country down a very dangerous path that will surely push millions more into hunger and poverty. In my congressional district and throughout the state of California, families are already feeling the impact of the Republican government shutdown. The California Women, Infant, and Children Program is on the brink of turning away low-income pregnant women and new mothers if this shutdown continues. How ruthless can you get? The California National Guard, the largest in the nation, is forced to furlough technicians and aviation mechanics even as the fire season is still upon us. And throughout the state of California, 8th graders like my constituents from Oakland who wrote to me yesterday are canceling field trips to national parks and monuments which are closed to visitors. What are they going to do now? And to add insult to injury, Republicans have shut down the government because they are obsessed with destroying the Affordable Care Act, which is the law of the land and which the Supreme Court upheld. Most Americans continue to see how senseless and wrong it is to shut down the government because you want to deny health care to millions. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Despite the Republican government shutdown, health care exchanges established under the Affordable Care Act have successfully opened for enrollment, and now millions of uninsured Americans are just 3 months away from having the health care coverage they so desperately need. California, the first state to commit to establishing its own exchange, launched the Covered California Exchange. Covered California's exchange includes health care options for individuals and small businesses. In my congressional district alone, there are nearly 100,000 uninsured constituents, and the opening of the exchanges mean that they are one step closer to health care coverage that can literally, mind you, literally make the difference between life and death. Hostage-taking really is a deplorable tactic. Members of Congress are elected to make sure our government functions. Time and time again, Democrats have reached across the aisle to try to negotiate a budget plan that is fair and that ensures that the government pays our bills on time. Yet instead of working together to do our jobs, Republicans continue to double down on the Tea Party plan to destroy and decimate our government. Instead of working on a serious option to reopen the government, Republicans' latest strategy now, and this is really cynical, that's to exploit our veterans and to exploit the people of the District of Columbia by voting on piecemeal bills that will not end impacts of a shutdown that extend across the country. Mr. Speaker, of course we support our veterans, and of course we support our national parks, and of course we support the District of Columbia to use its locally raised funds. But let's not use them to score political points to advance an ideological agenda. How do Republicans this week vote to allow the district to use its discretion on local funds during a shutdown, but they created, yet next week block the same funds for being used for saving reproductive health care services or badly needed needle exchange programs to fight HIV and AIDS. Again, this is so cynical and it is so wrong. The American people deserve a functioning government. This hostage-taking must end. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes a gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come here today just perplexed by what I see unfolding here today. My colleague just said that 2 wrongs don't make a right. And indeed, she's correct. But today this fight is really starting to get to be more political, and we're not focusing on the people. Yesterday, in this very chamber, Mr. Speaker, we put forth 3 different bills. One that would pay our veterans and making sure that those benefits continue to flow. And what did the Democrats say? They said no. One would open up our parks and monuments to be that economic stimulus once again. And what did the Democrats say? They said no. And then even in the District of Columbia, where we looked, Mr. Speaker, at truly putting forth and allowing them to use some of their funds to pay the teachers and do some of the operations, I can tell you I don't get any votes from the District of Columbia. For me, that is not a politically expedient thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. And so what did we do, Mr. Speaker? We put forth a bill, and yet what did the Democrats say? No. You know, I am so troubled that what we're seeing over and over again is this bantering back and forth, and yet we're willing to open up parts of the government and continue to do that every single day until we get everything restored. You know, this is not about Obamacare. Obamacare is a mandatory spending. This is about getting the government back open in a responsible way, and what we're doing is working very hard, trying to work in a bipartisan way to do that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to just say that it is time that the Senate comes back to the negotiating table and starts to negotiate on behalf of the American people that they represent. We have a responsibility to our veterans, to those that serve in the reserves, and so today we will see more opportunities in this very chamber to fund those things that are precious, near and dear to all of us. And I humbly ask my colleagues on the other side to join us in a bipartisan effort to start working for the American people and representing them. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Arizona, Ms. Kirkpatrick, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, partisan games have serious consequences. One of the many consequences is in my Arizona district, where the Grand Canyon National Park is closed and our local economy is taking a direct hit. Instead of acting responsibly and funding the government with a clean bill, on Monday night, the House GOP acted recklessly. It is a bill that they passed Monday night so weighed down with partisan baggage that they knew it would lead to a government shutdown. And yet they chose this approach intentionally. The price of these partisan games is high, and the American people are now stuck with the tab. Some estimates have the shutdown costing our nation about $300 million every day. In Arizona and across the country, this hurts our working families, small business owners, veterans, and seniors. And this hurts our tribal communities. I have 12 Native American tribes in my district. All of these folks need and deserve to have elected leaders working to help them, not hurt them. And after what happened on Monday, we must now do the urgent work of funding and reopening our government. But instead, the House GOP is stalling with more games, introducing piecemeal bills that pick winners and losers for funding. Last night, they tried to do it with piecemeal bills for veterans and for national parks. I will always fight for our veterans. I am proud to serve them in my work on the Veterans Affairs Committee. The first piece of legislation I passed this year will help our veterans who are stuck in the VA backlog. And I will always stand up for our national parks. I am grateful to live near the Grand Canyon, a national treasure. My district has many of these wonderful destinations. I recently introduced a bill that will protect and expand the Casa Grande Ruins National Monument in southern Arizona. So my support for these issues is clear. But the real way to support our veterans and support our parks is to reopen the government. And if piecemeal is their solution, then what about making sure Social Security offices are open to help our seniors? What about making sure programs to help women and children are up and running? And what about our Indian Health Services, which serves the 12 tribes in my district? We need to restart everything and protect our economy. Taking a piecemeal approach to the shutdown is like driving down a dead-end street. The House GOP knows this, and yet they refuse to allow a vote on a clean CR. We are wasting precious time. Every ounce of energy and urgency in Congress should be directed toward reopening the government and protecting our economy. Our local economies in Arizona are taking a direct hit. Yesterday, on day one of the shutdown, in my district, busloads of tourists and hundreds of visitors were turned away from the Grand Canyon National Park. These folks had waited a year or more for their turn to go on a river rafting trip in the canyon. There were even folks whose weddings, planned long ago, had to be scrapped yesterday. The Grand Canyon National Park generates more than $1.2 million a day in visitor spending, and that spending, like the government, is now shut down. I represent several other national park attractions, including the Petrified Forest National Park, the Grand Canyon Ruins National Monument, and the Montezuma National Monument. These are some of Arizona's most important economic drivers. We can't afford to hang a closed sign out in front of these destinations. This shutdown will devastate the small communities in my district. I call on my House colleagues to stop the games and get to work to restart government. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Generally yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Wood.